Brought to you by Penguin.
The Unconscious by Sigmund Freud, read by Michael Pennington. Introduction. The ratio between clarity and obscurity at the level of knowledge tipped towards obscurity in the 19th century. Problem after scholarly problem withdrew from a field of transparent relations into opacity. What was said, what was done, what was expressed, no longer belonged to a human discourse illuminated by reason and understood by spontaneous consciousness. Suddenly, the thought of demonstrating a universal truth by referring to an inner certainty was becoming buffoonish, a quack philosophy. Everything was becoming less self-evident, including the self. The subject was surrounded not by a transparent world, but by overlapping systems which did not disclose their conditions of intelligibility. For Michel Foucault, in The Order of Things, the domains of language, life, and labour each became obscure objects whose real nature was not only different, but at variance with the way in which they appeared to human consciousness. The system of language, whether considered as a grammatical structure or as the condensation of a culture, was not available to a speaker. Even as the subject seemed to speak the language, it was the language which spoke the subject. In an emergent biology, the subject lived and died in a process whose mechanisms completely escaped him. And in society, the subject laboured to reproduce a system that was not his intent, over which he had no control, and whose workings were hidden from subjective life. It is not surprising, then, that the 19th century needed a strong idea of the unconscious to depict the relations of the subject to the objects of his reality and to the question of knowledge. Individual disciplines emerged precisely to bring back those objects into the field of public knowledge. The specifically modern sense of disciplines was proposed to rectify the general problem of obscurity. What the subject now lacked in the ruins of common sense could be provided by disciplined knowledges. The subject could be educated, but this education, thought to stem from a new type of university and a new model of science and new models of the dissemination of knowledge, needed a general language to communicate the results and the significance of that knowledge. It found it in the category of interpretation, in the practice of linking the positive knowledges to what was taken as their meaning in a broad sense. Public discourse used as its primary currency the question of the consequences, the potentiality, the historical meaning of the new disciplines, of linguistics, of biology, of political economy. Public discourse worked along the axis of the unconscious and interpretation. The subject who lacked a conscious grasp of phenomena was to be restored by an education in knowledge, whose significance was the work of interpretation. Given this, it is not surprising that many historians of ideas have insisted that Freud's work was deeply embedded in the 19th century. The two terms, unconscious and interpretation, are sufficient signs of this. The presumption that the subject does not have conscious, spontaneous access to what determines him, that a knowledge is a disciplined interpretation of material, theoretically established and justified by evidence, all this is indeed a position which Freud shared with orthodox intellectual culture of the 19th century. And Freud never lost these convictions, nor the hope that psychoanalysis would take its place among the human sciences. Much of what historians say in asserting that Freud was at home in the 19th century is true. Indeed, where else would he be at home? But amongst other things, Freud warned against the category of at home. Home is more than it seems to be. The papers collected in this volume, if they did nothing else, would sharply distinguish Freud's concept of the unconscious from his 19th century precursors. Sometimes, for literary reasons, as in the opening passages of the paper The Unconscious, he aligns himself with a certain orthodoxy by repeating a critique of consciousness. Consciousness is full of gaps. It simply does not function as a continuous and exhaustive representation of what we know. We forget things, we make slips of the tongue, and above all we hold most thoughts, feelings, and knowledge in a realm of latency. From this we must infer that the mind, at the least, is made up of at least two registers, conscious.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?